Welcome back to the Change in the Perception of Sales. The podcast is designed to change the way people perceive the sales industry. Sales shouldn't be this dirty word, and together with the help of you and our guests, we're looking to add value and share insights to the sales community, and together make sales a career of choice. On today's episode, we are joined by Annabella, Director of Sales Development. A very interesting conversation where we unpack Anna's move over from Hungary at the age of 18, where she could not speak a word of English, her later than most entry into tech sales, and why businesses can benefit from hiring SDRs from more diverse backgrounds. And lastly, we discussed changing the perception of PIPs. Anna was placed on a performance improvement plan early on as an SDR and managed to turn this around and progress into directorship. A real success story. Hope you enjoy listening. Welcome to this episode of the Change in the Perception of Sales podcast. And today I'm delighted to be joined by Annabella. Anna, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure. And to kick things off, as we always like to do, please just share a bit of a brief introduction into a little bit about who you are.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you again for having me, Kyle. It's, amazing to be here. I'm super excited about this conversation. So, as you've said, quite rightly, my name is Annabella. I have spent the last 6 years of my professional career in sales development within the tech industry. Starting my career as an SDR at Redis and basically transitioning into a senior leadership role within a few years. So I've been very fortunate to have grown my career within Redis. And just a quick context around what Redis is. Redis is basically a data platform that powers thousands of applications that you and I use on a day-to-day basis, basically to make sure that it's reliable, it's fast, it's secure, and it's giving you and I the best end user experience, basically, right? So I've started my journey 6 years ago at Redis, but previously, prior to Redis, my background was in travel retail and, of course, leadership within travel retail.
Brilliant. Thank you for the overview, and we'll definitely be looking into quite a lot of that journey. To begin with, then, quite a different journey into sales than probably most. How did you even hear about? How did you even get into the role of an SDR in the first place?
Yeah, great question. And look, the one thing that I did do, I've gone back to university as a mature student. So at that time, when I went back in 2014, I was already a little bit older than my, other fellow students there. So it was very intimidating to go back to uni. But in my third year at university, whilst I was writing my dissertation, what I did do is I started to research the industries that were booming at that time. And of course, on top came out technology, right? And databases and data platforms. And I also started looking into what are the typical roles that people kind of go into, especially entry level roles where you can work your way up and grow within an organization. And this is how I come across, the SDR role, and of course the tech industry. Now, I was sending out, as you would as a student, of course, you would be sending out hundreds of applications and resumes to the organizations that you felt like you could be the right fit for. And honestly, as you can imagine, I had zero responses at that point. So once I graduated, I actually heard about Redis and the opportunity through a friend of a friend who was hiring. So I do want to give a huge shout out to Lindsay Rees, actually. I know she will be watching because she was my first manager at Redis, and she really was the person and the leader who has taken a huge risk on me of getting me into the organization with no SDR experience, no experience in the tech. So it was really a gamble for her as well. But you're quite right. It was a very different journey because prior to university, I had a full career, a professional career in travel retail, first as a customer service consultant, and then moving into leadership. So I had a team of 20 customer service assistants who I was directly managing at that point. So yes, this is how I've come across Redis. The rest is history.
Brilliant. Love it. Shout out to Lindsay as well. But yeah, I love the journey. It's very different to most people's journey or entry point into the SDR role because, again, rightly or wrongly, typically it's people at the very early on in their careers or people fresh out of university. What was it like for you, and how did it feel when you were sending off all of those applications and just not getting anywhere with your approaches?
It was a really scary time. The only thing that I had going for me was that I had three part-time jobs, right? One job where I was working in marketing and really helping an organization at that point. I was always very independent when it came to that. So even when I packed up my retail career and moved to a completely different city, 2 hours away from my sisters, right? Just literally leaving my place and moving into down to Buckinghamshire, leaving my job. I always knew that I wanted to stay independent and pay my own bills, right? Despite the fact that I had a lot of help along the way, because I couldn't have done this without my family, of course. But a really different journey, when it comes to me being part time, working for three organizations and then having to send resumes again, all over again. I mean, I haven't done that at that point since 2008. And we were talking about 2017 here. So it's been a while, since I've updated my resume. So it was a very different journey for me to having to send those resumes. And of course, I tried to tailor it as much as I could and do everything that you would do when it comes to the best practices. But not hearing back was really difficult. So this is when I started to go to conferences. I started to really get involved in networking events as well. But honestly, I was very fortunate to know someone who knew someone. And that was again through networking, right? And getting to know people who was hiring at that point. So that was my kind of lucky break, you could call it that.
Yeah, I get that. And look, through networking and through the relationships you had, it sounds like you made your own luck as well. Um, I think there's a bit of a stigma attached because you were essentially a career changer, someone that had a successful career in another industry, not massively dissimilar, but a different industry, and then transitioned over to the SDR world. And again, I think there's still a stigma attached to a lot of businesses or hiring managers just might not even consider that type of person. I've got my own thoughts on why they should, but I'm keen to hear from you as someone that's been there and demonstrated that actually you can be still very, very successful regardless of where you're at in your life. Why should a business consider widening their talent pool and considering career changes or people that are at a different stage?
Yeah, great question, Kyle. And look, I think it comes down to ultimately being open minded and being someone who has already built up some experience and the interpersonal skills that they need to be successful in that particular vertical, right? And I think there is a stigma, of course, when people are changing and transitioning from one vertical to or one industry, shall we say, to another. But honestly, what has worked for me and where I've hired my best performing SDRs was that I wasn't necessarily looking for experience. I wasn't even looking for, okay, so have they been in the tech industry? Because they have to be in the tech industry because they need to have that experience. For me, what was really important is experience in terms of have they worked at all, right? Because if we were looking for someone who we needed to really ramp up a little bit faster, then I needed someone who has at least worked in retail or had some sort of job experience, okay, or work experience or an internship as such. But really, it's the attitude. It comes down to the mindset and the potential. I think when I hired my first two SDRs, and shout out to them, you know who you are, they came from, recruitment and the beauty industry. Okay. Neither of them had experience as SDRs. Neither of them have had experience in the tech industry. They became my highest performing SDRs within a matter of a few months. Okay. So, of course, that involves you being there as a leader and coaching them through it. But honestly, I think we have to be, as hiring managers and organizations, we need to be super open minded, especially nowadays. I mean, just look at how the job market has changed in the last few years. And you see all of these posts all over LinkedIn that are saying you need to have a gap in your CV. And long gone are the days where you had to stay within one organization for 8 years. Mm. That's my story. But I've always been a very loyal person. But those days are really gone. And it doesn't mean that people are not loyal, but it just means that people need different experiences. And if you want to transition, you already have built up some of this experience, let's say, in sales, that you can take away with you into other parts of the organization. So I think, it's essential that we look at not just, just being very single minded about you need to have experience in the tech industry, you need to come from our competitor. And, it's gone. Those days are gone in my mind.
Yeah, good. I agree with that as well. I still think there's a big education piece to be done because, again, there'll be just so many businesses that might not either consider, maybe ageism to a certain extent. They might just not consider people at a certain stage, and they've probably got so much more experience, not just work experience, but life experience that they can then pass on to prospects, customers, even the organization. So I think if there's anyone listening to this that hires SDRs, well, one, it could benefit your business, but it'll increase the talent pool massively as well. So, yeah, really, really good story, and I guess introduction into sales for yourself. It obviously wasn't straightforward necessarily, even in your career before that, because I'm aware and know that you made the bold move over from Hungary, I believe it was, at the
Yeah.
age of 18, which looked very inspirational. I wouldn't mind if you could just share us a little bit more about the journey and the move over to the UK those years ago.
Yeah, for sure. And the scariest thing I have ever done in my entire life, I've got to point out, okay, because finishing, your A levels, and both me and my twin sister were at the stage where we were like, what are we going to do? There's not many opportunities here in Hungary for us where we could really see ourselves grow and learn as individuals. So we were very fortunate at that point that our other sister was already building a life for herself in the UK. So my twin sister decided, look, I need to go and learn a language. I'm going to go out there for the summer break for a couple of months and see how things plan out. And I want to work and just experience a different lifestyle. So there I was thinking, oh my gosh, my twin is going, my other half is going like 2,000 kilometers away from me. What am I going to do? So, of course, we already had this separation anxiety at that point between the two of us. And I guess when it comes down to the motivation behind why I have come to the UK, first of all, it was her because she decided she wants to stay. Best decision she's ever made. So she was one of my muse, in order to make that move. But secondly, I always felt like I was meant for more. I was always a very curious person. I still am. I wanted to learn, I wanted to progress, and I wanted to become that support pillar for my mom. She has been an incredible parent. Of course, I'm a little biased, but she has been an incredible parent and giving us everything, despite the fact we were struggling, a lot of the time financially. And we haven't had the opportunity to go to university because we couldn't afford it. And I certainly didn't want my mom to pay for my university journey. I wanted to be the one who's going to be financing that if that ever happens. So I wanted to come out and just build my life and build a story, my new story, basically. So I spoke zero English at that point.
Wow.
So as you can imagine, I came out as an au pair. So I was living with a family of six strangers. And it was so surreal. I still remember, and it was 20 years ago on the 25th of September, 20 years ago, I still remember, where I stepped into this house knowing none of them. Okay. And you're just there and you're like, I want my mom. I know I'm 18, but I just want my mom. And I cried myself to sleep. But then you just carry on, right? And you start to learn, and you start to get familiar with the family and the things that you need to do on a day-to-day basis. I was looking after four children, doing all the housework, the cleaning, the picking up from school, you name it. So it was a very different experience and a very scary experience. And Kyle, I would be lying to you if I said to you I haven't changed my mind 3 times about being here because I wanted to go back home and I was ready to buy my ticket to go back home. But I persevered because I wanted to stick around and I knew that I had a mission that I wanted to accomplish. So look, it's scary, but if it scares you, it's a great thing and you need to jump. Right. And I've jumped many times in my life. And again, jumping and coming to the UK, great decision. Jumping into travel retail and becoming a leader there for 7 years, great time of my life. Again, jumped again, going back to university. So look, you won't improve and you won't get better and you won't grow unless you actually jump and you kind of get to a point where you're like, yeah, I fear this and I'm scared, but I can do this. So you need to believe in yourself, and it's all about mindset.
It is indeed. If it scares you, it's a good thing. I completely agree. I think that's where growth tends to happen. I just find it so incredible that at the age of 18, I mean, twins really can't be apart, can they? I mean, this proves that. But you couldn't speak a word of English at the age of 18, and I believe it's harder to learn the older you are as well. It's a lot easier in your younger years. What was that feeling like coming to the UK? And the reason I ask is there's a lot of people we speak to, that move over and are looking to build a career here. But what did it feel like coming over here, not speaking the language, not knowing what people were saying, probably finding it, challenging getting into work as well? Like, how did it actually feel at that time when you made the move?
Uncomfortable. Um, Honestly, I had to learn to become comfortable with being super uncomfortable with the fact that I couldn't express myself. I just thank goodness for body language, okay? Because without that, it would have been a lot more difficult, okay? So we were literally explaining ourselves between me and the family with hands and legs and you name it, okay? It was really surreal that coming, into a different country, not speaking the language, I, I literally didn't know at one point what to do. There were days when I felt so disappointed in myself, so embarrassed about the fact that I couldn't speak, and so shy, so much so that it's really taken me a few months to really get into speaking the language. And honestly, my twin sister, it took her 6 months. And she was surrounded with English people around her. So obviously, all she heard was people speaking in English to her. And she's like, I don't know what you're talking about. So, really uncomfortable, very just nerve-wracking, to be in a country where I can't even get on the bus to get my bus ticket, and I have to rehearse my lines to make sure that I say the right thing and I ask for the ticket to go to the right place, right where I need to go. So really scary times, honestly. But you have to stay resilient. And I said this to you on our previous conversation. The one thing that I did do is I surrounded myself with English people, or people who I could only speak to in English. Okay, because if I surrounded myself with other Hungarians, my learning path and the journey would have been a lot longer. Okay, and I knew people who did that, and it wasn't really for me because I wanted to learn and I wanted to really get better at expressing myself. So went to college for a couple of months with my twin in the UK. Oh my gosh. It was really interesting where you were surrounded with other people who didn't speak the language as well. And of course it felt more comfortable because you weren't the only one being an absolute, crazy person not speaking the language. So look, it's scary, it's uncomfortable, it makes you feel really vulnerable. And I think all of this has really helped me understand who I am, what I want to do, and that I just want to continue to keep pushing forward because the more you learn, the better you get at certain things, right? And look, here I am today. Who would have thought that in 20 years I would have been able to tell a story that I'm telling you this now, where I became a director of sales development for an incredible tech organization and had the journey that I've had. So anything is possible. Just keep persevering.
Love it. Very motivational and inspirational, Anna. What I love there as well is because I think you can relate it to anything, but especially sales. You surrounded yourself with people speaking English. The easy thing probably would have been to, I'm sure there'll be groups and communities of people, from your native country you could have hung around with and spent time with. But actually, in sales, again, if you don't know something, you want to get better at it, you want to surround yourself with people that are better than you, and that will speed up the learning curve. So I just think that mantra in general will help anyone for whatever they do in life. Coming on to then the SDR role. So fast forward back now, obviously you've had your career in the travel industry. Starting as an SDR, I believe you were the number 3 SDR for Redis when you joined.
For the international organization of Redis, yes. So there were two incredible high performing SDRs already across EMEA. So I tried to learn as much as I could from them. But yes, I was the third one. So we were really such a startup, such a startup. Honestly, no processes or not many in place. We really were more of an inbound function for the first 6 months of my journey at Redis. And of course, there was a lot to work through. I remember not knowing how to use Salesloft, right? And all of the tools that we needed to be able to do our job. So I tried to absorb as much as I could. But to be honest with you, Kyle, the first few months were the most challenging for me because I was really struggling to understand the complexities of Redis and the value add to organizations and how I can actually, pitch it, as you would call it, or portray that back to our prospects. It was those times, like 6 years ago, is more around feature selling as well, rather than value based selling. So
Mm.
I still remember trying to sell the features, and most of the time it didn't work. Okay, it just didn't. So you had to really A/B test, but it was really challenging for me. So much so that I was underperforming and I wasn't hitting my target. And it was challenging because I worked with people who weren't necessarily as easy to work with. Um, and that obviously I sat down and she said to me, you know, here it comes, the performance improvement plan. And look, we on progress. And there is a ding dong moment in your head and you think, okay,
Oh
so
no.
I have 30 days to really, I have two options basically here. Okay. One is I could feel really embarrassed about the fact that I have failed and I have let people down who have given me the opportunity to come into this organization and hit the numbers hard, right? And add value with my expertise. Or I could decide that, you know what, I need to do some reflection. Have I really given this role what it deserves? Have I really pushed hard enough to be successful and make this a great journey? And honestly, the more of these questions I was asking myself, the more the answers were nope, nope, nope. I could have done a lot more. Of course, I could have. So I decided in my head that, look, I'm just going to make the most of this now and I'm going to focus. I want this. And I committed myself to do this so much so that I in my head I had a goal that I want to become SDR of the year. So I started this journey in the second half of that year, that very same year, and I became performer of the year at that very same year, at the end of the year. But look, make no mistakes, that was tough. It was
Oh.
a tough journey, and I pushed hard. I really focused and I ramped up my activities. Okay, I became more productive. I started thinking outside the box and working with some of the other SDRs. Shout out to Ragav. Um, we worked on some great ABM campaigns, right, for our named accounts that have we started to implement across the board, for other teams as well. And I was always the first one wanting to go to events and being there as that social bunny. I loved networking. That's where I was really shining. That was my superpower. It still is. That's where I feel most alive. And of course, I was getting more results from phone calls. And I don't call them cold calls, I call them unexpected calls, and video prospecting. I was the first one kicking off the video prospecting project at Redis. And, only 18% of my meetings were coming from that. But that was still, a good result at that point when it was so new. So I did some different things to really get me to that point. Was I the best SDR? No, far away from it. Of course not. But that progress and that improvement that I've made just showcased to me that, look, if I put my mind to anything, everything is possible. You can achieve whatever you want to if you really put your mind to it and you commit. You have to commit to this and just relentlessly, just go through the motion.
I love the word relentless as well, just in general. But I think that's a really interesting story because performance improvement plans or PIPs or whatever people call them is probably considered usually as the end is near. And you're the perfect example as that is not the case. Going to become a SDR of the year and then global director. That's miles away from being on a performance improvement plan. How was it kind of positioned to you by, shout out to Lindsay again, but how was it positioned to you? And then how do you think hiring managers should position performance improvement plans to their team?
Look, the way it was positioned to me back then is that there is a piece of paper. We need to write down what it is that you need to improve on. This is the goal. This is what you need to do it by, and the usual spiel of a smart plan, basically. But it was positioned in a way that, look, it's either this or this, right? So it's either going to be a new beginning or the end, right? And I always said to myself that after that look, if it happens that I get into leadership, which is what I always wanted to do, and this was my calling, and I have been very lucky to know what my calling was, then I am going to start to kind of try and change the perception around PIPs. And even when I started managing SDRs after 2 years of being at Redis, I positioned it as a coaching success plan. So if I saw that one of my SDRs was struggling a little bit more, but they were putting the work in, I put together this coaching success plan with them, okay, where they took, of course, full ownership of this, but I was there to coach and guide them through this. Because what is the sole purpose of a PIP? Is to make sure that you can improve on some of the certain skill sets, or the targets, the way you're hitting your targets, and make progress, right? So to me, whilst I had to, as an individual contributor, take ownership of that. And I had to commit and decide in my mind that I wanted to do this. And I expected that from all of my SDRs. As leaders, it is also our, duty to make sure that we are there to guide our SDRs through this. And we are there as coaches and not as managers. And we're not trying to micromanage through these coaching plans. Okay. And I do understand that, of course, there comes a point if somebody is really underperforming and you've given them all the chances and you work through a plan and they're not really showcasing that they really want to do this and they are committed, then of course, there is only one way to do this. But look, many times I have led SDRs through a coaching success plan, and they were thriving throughout the plan and after the plan, okay? And they progressed. But we do need to also invest a little bit more time in helping these individuals, especially the ones who came into the industry with not that much experience, right? And we have to make sure that it is positioned in a way that it's almost positive rather than, straight away thinking about, oh my gosh, I'm going to lose my job. Okay. I never thought about PIPs that way ever since I've become a leader at Redis, and it worked for me. So I hope that many people will be able to look at them as, look, we just need to invest a little bit more coaching in these individuals and they can thrive. Because look, Kyle, ultimately, when you're hiring, you hire for that potential, you hire for the right attitude. So there is a reason why you hire this person into the organization. If they are not successful, that means you are not successful. And look, we all make mistakes. I put my hands up, and that's part of the journey. But it's expensive, to hire and then just say goodbye to someone. You want to make sure that, first of all, you hire right, but you are there as a coach for your team. That's my 2 cents.
Yeah, no, a great 2 cents. Changing the perception of pips on the changing the perception of sales. So we've got coaching success plans now. But I agree with you. I think the whole mentality around them being, last thing you want is someone that's on a pip thinking, oh, I'm going to lose my job. As you said, it should be to improve performance. I think this is going to be quite a hot topic. So to get into the granular details, I think these are questions that hiring managers and probably individuals would want to know. How long does someone need to be underperforming for you to consider putting them on a coaching success plan? And then how long do they stay on that plan for typically?
I mean, it depends. Okay. If somebody comes into the organization who is experienced in the industry, who's done the SDR role before, of course, your expectations are going to be higher for them to ramp up faster and start delivering those numbers and hitting those ramping numbers and then their full quota numbers. So if you see that, within 3, 4 months, they're not really performing, by the way, you shouldn't get to that point, because you're having your weekly one-to-ones where it's all about coaching and it's all about feedback, and you're being there for your team, and they can tell you what they are struggling with, where are the challenges, what do they need help with. Okay, and you should be there to help them through this. And there is a reason why Redis runs a buddy program as well. We have a great program where a new starter comes in, they are immediately allocated by the hiring manager, allocated a buddy who's going to be helping them through, as well as their leaders. So if they are experienced, I would say the expectations are a little bit higher, of course, and you would want them to really ramp up faster within those 3 months. I would say, if you don't see with others who are less experienced, it will take longer. So it could take anything between 4 months, 5, 6. It very much depends how fast individuals can pick this up and learn. And as I said to you earlier, I hired somebody from the recruitment background, and my goodness, he just hit it so hard straight away. And he just got it. He got the complexity of the product. He got the value aspect of the product. And he was sailing through his numbers. So again, it very much depends on individuals as well. It's really difficult to put people in the bucket. And I know organizations will want to say, okay, if they don't perform after 3 months, then you need to put them on a PIP coaching plan. Um, I bring a lot more flexibility into the way I run my business and my team usually.
Yeah. Yeah, but the PIPs, we don't say PIPs anymore. Coaching success plans. Coaching success plans. But I think, yeah, it's like it's, there's a lot of nuances, levels of experience, complexity in sales cycle and product, and loads of different things that come into it. Just few of the things that you mentioned then about giving feedback, obviously the ability to deliver coaching success plans, so they're a positive thing. It
Mhm.
just kind of came to me. How much do you think your previous experience in leadership in the travel industry actually helped you accelerate your progression at Redis? Because from SDR, 6 years being a global director, that is very, very fast. I'm just curious, how much did the previous career probably help you with that, the speed of that transition?
I think it helped me immensely. And I think what also helped me is that I knew that I wanted to be in leadership. So I was striving for that anyway, right? So when you know what you want to do, you try and do all the different things to get you there and get you there faster. And yes, you're quite right. My journey was a lot faster than what you would usually see within the industry. But honestly, being at duty free for 7 years and managing large teams and going through the whole performance management cycle twice a year, not just once, twice a year, with all of them, and having a large team, and honestly, the things that I have done at duty free, managing people, having difficult conversations, having gone through conflicts and resolutions, it really immensely helped me, I think, how I can deal with certain individuals at Redis as well, and even at university. My experience and work experience has really enabled me at university as well to take this to another level and become almost that coach and that go-to person for the other students that were in my group, and in my classes. So I think it was a huge advantage for me. But again, I do want to re-emphasize that without my manager and without her manager, and shout out to David Freudenstein here as well, I wouldn't have got to that international director of sales, the DR manager, or a leader. They don't come about as often. Okay. But all you can do is set yourself up for success. So much so, and I know I'm diverting from this a little bit, but so many times, Kyle, I see SDRs wanting to progress so fast to that next level. Let it be a closing role, let it be a management role, without even thinking about the fact that, look, you've been here a year, you've done this, and you're doing great and you're hitting the numbers. But look, there are different skill sets as well that are going to be required for you to move into this position. So let's become an expert in this role and let's focus on how we can build you up to that next role. And what I did do as an SDR is I started having those internal conversations, right, with people who were coming into the organization, sales leaders, other managers, other SDRs. And this is where you can set yourself up for success. So I think that has also helped me get to an SDR manager position after 2 years of being at Redis. But it takes a village. Kyle, yes, of course, you have to do it yourself and own it as much as you can. But if you haven't got the right managers and the right leadership and the support that you need in your background, it becomes increasingly harder.
Yeah. And I think it's what you said before about delivering feedback and performance management and all of these things that when SDRs go into leadership, they have never done it before. It is all alien. And that's why a lot of SDRs don't make great managers. Whereas, again, try to champion hiring people from different and more diverse backgrounds. You had done those things, which probably really helped with the transition. And video prospecting. You said earlier that 18% of your meetings were coming from video prospecting.
Yeah.
I remember when it first came onto the scene. I think Vidyard was probably the first one I remember anyway. In your opinion, how effective is video prospecting today?
Mm, if it's done right and it's personalized and it makes you laugh and it kind of stands out in whether it's in a bizarre way or a really, I mean, when I did it, we used Drift. It was our tool, not necessarily for video prospecting, but of course it was our chatbot. So I started using that as part of my video prospecting, and I spent a lot of time personalizing some of my video recordings. And look, the return wasn't as huge, and it wasn't the number that I really wanted to get to. But when you personalize it, that's when I got the response from most of the prospects. I think it's really down to us as leaders and organizations to really take on that project and start educating our teams around the different channels and how these channels can be used. I remember one of my SDRs, the first SDR who I during COVID, when I started my SDR manager journey, she started video prospecting as well. And she was doing all the written signs and, putting little giffies and her face in when she was doing demos. And she was doing great, but again, the return isn't as high. And I've got to be honest, than when you're picking up the phone. When you pick up the phone, that's where the power is. So this is where we were converting the majority of our meetings. I did too, and from events. So it can be powerful, but you need to know when to use it and who to use it with. I think it's important which ICP you're using videos with.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Different personas and different people probably respond to videos better. And it's like anything, right? If the quality of a cold call is poor, it's not going to convert. If the quality of video is poor, I think people give up quite easily with videos because it can, at the beginning, take a little bit longer. And if people don't watch them, it can get frustrating. And there's nothing worse when you get that little notification X has watched 18% of your video. You're like, why? Why did I not capture their attention early on? But I thought it was an interesting point because initially it was something everyone was doing. I don't think it's being done anywhere near as much anymore as probably it was doing, but we will see. Bringing it back onto your career, then we obviously focused a lot around the SDR being on a coaching success plan, which you evidently came out of the other end of. You were on SDR number 3. How many SDRs are currently in the organization?
So 21, and when we're talking about the organization, let's talk just maybe the international part of the
Hmm.
business. It's 21 SDRs and 3
Yeah.
SDR managers. So
Right. Wow. So a bit much bigger team than when you initially joined.
it is even
And
bigger. I'm sorry to cut you off, but it was even bigger a couple of years ago. It was, I think we got up to 24 SDRs at one point as well.
well,
But of course, the economy started to decline a little bit. So, of course, as many organizations, we were going through a bit of a tougher patch. But yeah, 21, and it's growing. It's not about to stop.
yeah. And on you mentioned then the tougher patch. Yeah, it's no secret that things have been turbulent, should we say, over the last few years. As someone that's clearly passionate about leadership in both sales, but even in your previous career, what should a leader be doing during tough times?
Wow, that's a loaded question. I think the most important part is that you need to continue to stay transparent with your team. Borderline, like try not to overshare, because they don't necessarily need to know everything and all the nitty gritty. But what you need to be is very open and honest with your team of what's happening, right? And why is this happening? And what is the purpose of why are we doing this? As long as they understand this and they understand how will it impact them, then you're good. As a leader, our job is to make sure that we motivate and we continue to inspire our teams. And that's exactly what we need to do. And it's not rocket science. You need to be bringing the energy. And I can tell you, there were days when I did not have the energy to bring, okay, where I was like, I just want to have a day off and go for a 5-hour walk. But you remember then what your purpose is here. And we as leaders just need to continue to have an open mind, be there for our teams when they need to talk to us, and just keep open communication. The one thing that I used to do as a director and as well as a leader is having this weekly either happy hours or just venting sessions, okay? Or even encouraging our team to have just book like half hour or an hour here for all of you. I don't need to be there because you ultimately may want to even discuss me or my SDR managers or someone. You need to have your own space and safe space to do that. And that's okay. But we need to encourage that open communication, because the last thing you would want is people bottling up how they feel. And it's really interesting, Carl, because I was listening to a podcast a couple of weeks ago. It's called The Mindset Mentor by Rob Dial. Life changing. And in one of the episodes, he basically just said, you need to give yourself permission to feel again. And wow, I get cold shivers just again repeating that, because so many times we forget to reflect. We get so freaking busy with everything, with life, with work, and we just continuously moving forward without taking, I need to share this because if I don't, I will explode. So you need to give, as a leader, your people that platform to be able to do that.
Love it. No, great. I think transparency, openness, honesty, all of that is key, and probably what people do look for in a leader as well. So I think that's really, really valid points. If you look at your kind of career and being a global international SDR director, the odds really have been stacked against you to a certain extent. Moving over at the age of 18, obviously a career changer, and then being on a coaching success plan. And unfortunately, a lot of people with those experiences might have never even thought about getting into sales. A lot of people come over to the UK, might get rejected from a load of sales jobs, don't then try. Might be career changes that don't. And again, people might exit a business due to underperformance and just fall out of love with sales altogether. What we're kind of on a mission to do is to encourage more people and really champion that sales can be a great career. So based on your experiences, what do you think we can do to get more people like you actively wanting to go into sales?
Yeah, two things. Number one, I never looked at it in a way that the odds were against me. I see how that may be perceived that way, but the way I looked at it is that everything that happened was an opportunity for me to take it on, and all the failures and all the mistakes that I have made, I've learned from those. Okay. And as long as you learn from them and you move on and you're staying open to this and you're staying resilient, then again, as I said this, you can achieve anything. Okay. So I never really looked at it that way. Was it hard? You bet it was hard, super hard. But look, I wouldn't have it any other way, because if it's easy, it doesn't give you that satisfaction anyway in the first place. Why would you want to have easy? Second point is, what can we do to encourage more individuals into sales? Look, the one thing that I've done a few weeks ago at my university, and you and I spoke about this, is I did a keynote speaking session about my journey in sales as a woman in leadership. It was International Women's Day, so it was mainly around women in leadership and really championing the incredible women that I have worked with, and just sharing my journey, the good, the bad, the ugly, and really talking about how can you get that seat at the table, and how can you make sure that you don't, you obviously will change in the process, but how can you make sure that you continue to stay true to yourself and to your values, your mission and your purpose is super important. So I went there, and that room was full of students, industry professionals, and my very much loved lecturers. And after this story and what I've said about my journey, it was just so overwhelming, the number of students who came up to me and told me how inspiring that was and how they wanted to, break into the industry, let it be the tech industry or sales or you name it. And I think we as leaders and as organizations need to go to universities more often and be part of networking events, be part of open days, and really start inspiring this new generation. I'm not going to say younger generation because I was a mature student. So this new generation of people who would want to actually break into sales, because it can open doors that nobody would ever imagine is possible. Okay, so I think that's one thing. It starts with education. I also think, and I was really fortunate when I was doing my university degree between 2014 and 17, because I had a couple of modules that were solely focused around sales and selling. I was doing a business management and marketing degree. So those were my favorite modules because we were super hands on and we were doing live projects and we were literally working with industry professionals who were coming in and listening to our presentations and giving us guidance. And this is where we've built up all of those interpersonal skills, hard skills, and soft skills that we needed um, to set us up for success. Basically, it was all around teamwork, communication, who's going to be the team lead, conflict, having difficult conversations. And I think universities need to do a lot more around this as well. And I truly hope that my university is still going to do this. I am a board member at Buckinghamshire New. I get to share, what my industry would want to see when it comes to the new generation coming out of universities, and of course the modules that universities are teaching. So again, it also comes down to our own perception. Okay, people need to stop thinking that it's selling. I read a blog the other day by Yasmina Fadli, and she was basically saying you need to change your focus and your mindset from selling to serving, because really what is selling is us being there as a trusted advisor to these organizations and to these prospects to help them solve a problem. Okay, so we are serving them. So education, organizations attending to these open days and networking events, and also students going to conferences. That was one thing that I said to them that they should absolutely be doing: setting up a LinkedIn profile, start networking, and go to conferences. So it's a mixture of things, but there's a lot more that we can do.
There is indeed some really good stuff in there, and shout out to Bucks New University, because I did not know that they had modules specifically tailored towards sales, and it's one thing we've talked about on this podcast before that is still nowhere near as prevalent in universities as it should do. So maybe it's something we can chat about after, Anna, because we'd love to potentially get involved in helping out with any of the courses or even
Mhm.
being invited in. So that's really, really good to see, and sounds like we're going in the right direction. We're coming towards the end. One question I always do like to ask is, what one book or podcast would you recommend that anyone in sales or any SDR needs to listen to or read?
So the number one that I think they absolutely need to read is On Your Career and On Your Life by Andy Storch. He's also got a podcast around this where he's got guest speakers in. It's really talking a lot about how you can take ownership, full ownership of your career, and not just your career, but your life, how you can set those clear, smart goals for yourself to be successful and achieve what you want to achieve, right? And your mission and your vision. And it's a great way to go through the exercise of, okay, what are my values, right? What I would definitely say that. I would also say if they're coming into an organization that is a global organization, one of my absolute favorite was the Culture Map by Erin Mayer. Great book to understand those high context and low context countries and how you can really adapt your style when you're working with different nationalities and different teams, of course, EMEA and APAC, and of course the US as well. So, there are a lot of books, and also just Simon Sinek. Simon Sinek, he's great.
Mm.
Follow him wherever you can. He's got, Start with Why. Great book.
He
Sorry,
does
too
talk
much.
a lot of sense, doesn't he, Simon Sinek? Everything I watch, I'm like, you've done it again, haven't you? You've done it again. You're just talking sense. And then final one, Anna. In your opinion, what does the future of sales look like?
Whew. Look, I think, again, it goes down, as I said this before, it comes down to our perception. And this is why I love what you guys do here with this podcast, because you're really trying to change the perception and the way people think about sales. I think what I see in terms of trends, a lot of organizations are now really moving towards value based selling. Okay. And it's all about how can we solve these particular problems for your organization. And I think it's a booming industry. Sales is here to stay. The fact that, look, this is no longer a wolf of Wall Street. And don't get me wrong, some organizations are still doing it that way, unfortunately, and it may be working for them. But ultimately, it's all about, organizing smaller roundtable sessions with your customers and your prospects, and understanding their problems and their business objectives and how you can solve those. And this is actually one thing that Redis is doing really well, and have done very well. And this is where the power is. And it's all about being proactive. So, look, sales is here to stay. Okay. I just think we need to think about, not necessarily using the word sales all the time, but thinking about, look, we're here to serve you and we just need to change our own perception.
Brilliant. Anna, that's all we've got time for, but I've absolutely loved having the conversation today and learning more about your journey in sales. Thank you very, very much for joining us.
It's been an absolute pleasure. I look forward to listening back to this.